Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Metis Warrior here with Timothy and Alexandria.
Hello out there everybody.
And so today we have a special guest, Carl McKay, and he's going to actually be talking about some issues in Alberta. And he's going to be talking about how he's highly pissed off that he got a letter from the MMF claiming that they were representing him or trying to represent him in the 60 scoop. We'll get more into detail in that interview. He is not a member of the MMF, and to his understanding, the MNC was supposed to be doing this. So this is definitely breaking news on what transpired prior to this new president of the MNC being elected.
And I think what our listeners need to be aware of when the MMF withdrew from the MNC, David Chartrand, who is also the president of the Manitoba Métis Federation, was also the VP of the MNC, and he was also involved in certain projects, and being the Métis Legacy Veterans Fund and 60 Scoop. He was the minister that was directly involved in that, and I think we should be wondering how and if the transfer of power occurred, because we know that in 2019 the federal government gave the Métis Veterans Legacy Fund $30 million. So, and I know the balance sheet or statement of cash flows for the MNC for the year dating March 31st, 2020, they had cash at the end of the year of over $31 million. So where is that $31 million still there, and how did it flow? Where did the money really go? So that's what should be happening. I mean, a forensic audit of the MNC.
And here's some breaking allegations that have come about, and what we know and what we've heard is that some people were hired to be in the MNC for 2 days, is what we're being told, and then they were given a severance package of $1.8 million after being in there for 2 days. Now we're trying, again, this is the allegation. We're looking for the financial paperwork on that, which we're being told we'll get really soon. And so if that is indeed true, if people were hired 2 days prior to this new president coming in, and then the severance packages were $1.8 million, that would speak to some serious activity. Now again, those are allegations that we've been told by very reliable sources, and there is a paper trail, and people are actually talking right now. And so we're going to be bringing you an update on this. And again, that is an allegation.
And in regards to those allegations, we have to wonder who authorized this and who signed off on the alleged paperwork for these alleged severance packages. Who signed off on it?
Again, we have a lot of questions here. We had a meeting yesterday about this, and I will tell you that we are very much looking forward to getting the actual paperwork that shows all this. And if what we heard is true, if these allegations are true, and again, we will update you either way. If the allegations are true, if they're false, if it was 1.8 million, if it was a different figure, we'll update you regardless on that.
So folks, before we go into our very eye-opening interview with Carl, again, 2 things that should be on the agenda again is the Métis Veterans Legacy Fund, and again the Métis 60 Scoop. And we know, of course, that David Chartrand was the vice president of the MNC, and he also was the minister of social development in regards to Métis Nation 60 Scoop. So how did this all get handed over, etc.?
Yeah, what transpired prior to the new president taking over, because when the government gives the MNC money for certain things, the former president is not allowed to just drain that money and do whatever they want with that money. It should still be within the MNC. Was there authorization made proper authorization for whatever transpired prior to the new president. By the way, we wanted to actually congratulate the new president being elected, and so we will say congratulations to that, and we're looking forward to some transparency here in the future. And from what we heard yesterday, there's going to be a lot of transparency coming and eye-opening financials.
So folks, that's going to lead us into...
Well, hold on before we go into that interview, because I want to say that with Carl McKay, we agree with a lot of his views. There's some things that we do not agree with. One of them being the honorary, just giving somebody an honorary membership for Métis. We do not agree with that. He mentions it in the interview. There's a lot of problems with that. Okay, so how do you regulate who's going to be the honorary Métis? And do they actually receive funding? So we think Métis should hold Métis cards. We don't believe there should be honorary Métis out there, because if you're going to be fair about it and say, well, this person's spouse can be an honorary Métis, then all spouses would become automated honorary Métis. And if that is the case, then you're going to have a huge flow of people that are not Métis who's holding honorary Métis membership. And do they receive any benefits for that? And then another point he made was, if somebody is working in the Métis community and they work there for a couple of years, then they should be given an honorary Métis card. No, I disagree with that. I don't agree with that. However, we do agree with a lot of other stuff that he does say and talk about.
But before, quickly, and what the thing that really got Carl upset is the letter that he received again from the Manitoba Métis Federation dated September 29th, 2021. He is not a member of the Manitoba Métis Federation. He's concerned about a breach of privacy, how they got his contact information, and what I have a severe problem with on page 3 of that letter, and where David Chartrand says part of the reasons that they were forced to leave the MNC is to protect our national identity and stop the bastardization of our citizenship. That, to me, bastardization is not a term that a leader should be using in any form, and that's a very derogatory, negative term, not appropriate in my opinion.
And what we were told yesterday was that the MMF still has a seat in the MNC. And with that being said, we do know that the flag was removed from day two of the meeting, but that's because they withdrew, but they're still leaving them a seat there. And we do foresee the MMF coming back to the MNC, but clearly without David Chartrand. So there will be a change in the presidency coming soon. That is what we're focused on now, is making sure that we get a fair president in there that's going to go right back to the MNC.
Absolutely.
And so that's take a listen to the interview with Carl. It's breaking news, folks. Okay, so we are being joined now by Carl McKay, and he's out in Alberta, and he has some concerns that he wants to talk about. So we want to welcome you to the show, Carl. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Timothy and Alexandria. I'm so glad you called. Thank you for calling today. I'm calling. I'm actually, my end is being recorded from the Métis homeland near the traditional border of Athabasca and Alberta as we knew it in Riel's time.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah, that is great. So I know before we get into what's going on with your concerns with the 60 Scoop, I do want to ask you some questions to kind of tie in with the last show that we just released a couple days ago, talking about the problems in Alberta. Can you, as someone who is living in Alberta, share some concerns that's out your way?
Well, absolutely, and that is the biggest thing going on in Alberta. We really have 3 Métis boards here. We have, of course, the Metis Nation of Alberta. We have now the Alberta Métis Federation, and for so long we've had the Métis Settlements Governance Council that is recently asserting themselves a lot stronger.
Right.
And so with those three bodies, you have a lot of infighting within the provincial territory of Alberta, as it's known to settlers and contemporary time. The biggest problem with the Métis Nation of Alberta is they have a circle of people that get fed the cream of the crop, and the rest kind of get the leftovers that would normally just go to the pigs.
I believe to
And I
define,
hate it.
to give definition to what you just said, I believe that's known as nepotism.
Yes, absolutely. It's nepotism and favoritism. It goes beyond just what their families are doing, and it is a lot of people favoring their children and nieces and nephews and so on to be members of boards, and they are only the people that are contributing are the families. And not that it shouldn't be just the families, but it should be everybody. And with the Métis Nation of Alberta, they have less than 5% of actual identified Métis in Alberta working with them, or at least that's what the numbers were in the 2018 election. I haven't looked at the current numbers.
Right.
Well, do you know what the other organizations have working with them? What the percentage is on those?
So the Alberta Métis Federation, when I was an insider there, we were close to 4,000 members strong. I would assume they're if they have grown, and I'm hoping they are. I mean, I'm not trying to stop them from doing what they're doing. I would think they would go closer to the 5,000 number now, especially if Edmonton has managed to gain more support.
And what about the settlement organization?
The settlements, I don't have a lot of that information because I'm not an insider there. I know that there are within the electoral district that I worked in the Peace River Westlock riding in the last federal election as a volunteer. There are 4 Métis settlements in that region alone, which is around the Slave Lake, Peace River area of Alberta.
And you would think that with the Métis Nation of Alberta, you're saying that they're roughly at about 5% of the Métis in Alberta there. The problem is they probably should be at 0% right now with Portress at the helm, because Portress is not doing justice for the Métis in Alberta. She really is not. And our problem is the fact that she is actually involved in the new found Métis National Council. That's a problem for us and for a lot of people in Alberta, because I mean, you still have people that are not on the up and up. There's no transparency. Like you said, there's only a few that are the cream of the crop, so to speak, that are getting anything. And the rest of the people are being basically told to go screw off. And we know that because we get a lot of concerns from citizens in Alberta, Métis citizens in Alberta, who send us emails and are complaining about what's going on in the Métis Nation of Alberta. With that being said, the only thing that's really going to be bringing change there is to stop the funding within the Métis Nation of Alberta. The government actually should say, look, if you can't run a fair election and do the right thing for your people, then you do not need funding from the federal government. That's the way that I see it, because I do not think any president's position should be a permanent thing. It should be temporary. It should be a certain amount of years and not a lifelong deal, because that's a dictatorship and not a democracy.
Oh, I totally think we're on the same page there, Timothy. And there's one gentleman, or at least one specific online piece of literature called Lee Machiff, that I would direct you to in regards to finding inside information on what Patra and their little crowd is doing. I would also, Graham Andrews is leading the charge on that and holding them accountable for that, especially flipping properties and such. I've met Mr. Andrews a few times, and we think on the same level. It's just we're too busy to work together. Our schedules never ever coincide with each other. So Mr. Andrews is a carded member of the MNAA, and he also is a member of the Owl River Métis. And I see him as a leader, and I see him coming forward. If somebody can nominate him to run in the upcoming election, maybe we can unseat Poitras.
Well, that's the thing. That's what needs to happen for sure. She's got to be unseated. She has to be out of there. And not just her, but also those within her close circle and the power structure there, because it's just going to be more of the same if you get somebody in there that's outnumbered on the board. So you got to bring in you have to have fresh people come in and really make the change.
Exactly, and they need to operate it under the Society Act, which is the legislation that makes them legally accountable. And so you can't siphon off assets to your members. You can siphon it off to the nation. You can't siphon those assets to help the nation, to help people that are homeless or going through a traumatic situation. But you shouldn't be funneling it to your board members who already have a paycheck from the Métis people.
That's right, Carl, and it's Alexandria here, Carl. Thanks again for joining us. We've had we've actually been, as of late, really inundated with citizens that belong to the Metis Nation of Alberta Association telling us they were at the last meeting where, in their words, it seemed that Audrey was almost robotic and was just letting things pass and really not fighting for her people. And I've told so many people in Alberta, it seems like there's really got to be something going on behind the scenes why Audrey is really not doing anything. And forensic audits must happen. I think Region 1, there needs desperately to be a forensic audit in Alberta there, and so many where what's going on is just almost they say on the caliber of Chartrand and Chartier, and that's the next house that really needs to have a good clean out.
Yeah, well, the thing with Region 1 here in Alberta is that's the resource-rich region, and so that's where the majority of any shared funding could end up in either the MNAA's hands, the MSGC, which is the settlements, or Ron Cantel and the AMF. They all have to share that area and come to that understanding that they have to share it, and that's what's really causing the division, is the greed and not willingness to share. So the AMF really wouldn't have existed if the MNAA and Region 1 could have worked out their differences, and unfortunately they couldn't. And that's Diane Scoville was president of Region 1 prior to the last election, and I know Diane. It's unfortunate that we don't see eye to eye on how the AMF got formed. But that's that's another story. But when it comes back to Region 1, we need to relook at how we're putting these into regions. And would Rial like it if we called Alberta Region 1? He looked at Alberta as Alberta's borders ended near the Athabasca water basin, and they continued up to Saskatchewan and then down to Montana, and then you had Assiniboia and Saskatchewan on our eastern borders.
Right.
That was what Rial knew, not Region 1. He didn't call it Region 1. He would have called that Athabasca.
Yeah, it's just things that are going on in Alberta are just absolutely crazy, and more people are wanting to, or more and more locals, etc., are looking to separate from the Metis Nation of Alberta Association. It's just getting crazy there.
But here's the thing, Carl. Where is the courage in Alberta to do the right thing? We get contacted by so many citizens in Alberta, and I'm actually sick and tired of hearing people complain, and then when it comes time to get on record and tell their story, oh no, I don't want to do that. That's what they say. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Can you just go ahead and do the story without me? So there has to be some courage for change. We can talk about what Rial would be upset about, what anybody else, any of our Métis leaders in the past would be upset about. But I think the huge thing that they would be upset about is, in fact, the lack of courage. And that's why people are getting walked the hell over. And that's why you got a few people that are really greedy that are succeeding because people are allowing them to walk over them. When you have large numbers of citizens that stand together and let their voices be heard, then you get change.
Well, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the AMF. We're seeing those courageous leaders stand up, and bravo to them. It's just that we're not, if we're going to create the same funnel and start, allowing Ron Quintal to run private entities off of Métis funding, then we're not accomplishing anything. We're actually just emulating the same funnel. So we do need, I agree with you, we need courageous leaders that are not able to be bought. And that is the key word, being bought. So, kudos to Ron Quintal. You know what? Their land got tore up by the tar sands, man. Like, Fort McKay is if you've ever drawn through there or even seen a news article on it, you'd understand. Like, everything but the community of Fort McKay has been tore up by the oil sands mining region. So they should be receiving the majority of that funding. But being the fact that they are the largest recipient of funding, they should share some of that especially with the poor ones that have no resource funding and really are struggling with even getting, donations to help their starving communities that are lining up at the MMF, and then Chartrand tells them to go to hell.
Yeah.
These are all ran by, with Will Get On coming out here and signing up with the AMF and saying we're reaffirming our relationship with the MNC, and then 6 months later dump the MNC. Well, I kind of knew that they were dumping the MNC. We need a new national board that everybody's proud of, and I think that's the direction that we all should be looking at. Even now that the MMF is out of the MNC, we should be looking at what are we going to replace the MNC with, because a lot of people are disgruntled with it. Or if we're not going to replace the MNC, how are we going to change it from within?
They should have stayed a part of the MNC. I think they should have, but they walked away because they knew transparency, truth, and honesty is coming, and that it was an allergic reaction. Now, let's not take away anything that Chartrand and Chartier has done in the past. They've done a lot in the past. However, with power sometimes comes greed, and sometimes comes things that are not really working the way that it should be working, because people get comfortable in these positions of power and end up screwing their people. But Alexandra, what you got?
And what I wanted to add to what Timothy said, Carl, is that in regards to individuals stepping forward, I think the other side to that coin is there is a lot of fear, there is a lot of intimidation, and there's a lot of people that have been threatened with lawsuits for stepping forward. And I know in Alberta, you can use a lot of the bylaws there as toilet paper, because people ask for copies of things that citizens should rightfully have a copy of, and they're not. They're barred from an example is they're barred from the building. They're not allowed to have copies. So again, it's a lot of cloak and dagger stuff going in Alberta, where citizens, if they're trying to assert themselves, are threatened with, they're intimidated, and fear is a huge motivator, and a lot of people become scared. And I think we need more people to be more vocal. You even know yourself, Carl, even on social media, when you're trying to speak truth, right away the attack dogs or the keyboard warriors come out and they start slamming people, and then
and they actually start slandering people with lies.
Yeah, I mean, we see people being, attacked all the time, and then the last thing is that they block you on social media because they're tired of seeing the truth. And there's a few people that have, been out there really fighting in the trenches. A lot of even people, Jerry Malone, Miranda Moran, they've been really in the trenches yourself. A lot of people out there trying to speak truth, and they put up with a lot of crap from people.
And this is not,
yes, absolutely.
This new president for the MNC is not a nepotism president. So if the AMF wanted to approach the MNC, I'm pretty sure they could get representative through the MNC. All they have to do is reach out. because this is a new era for the MNC. So they just got to reach out. And I want to make things clear to the people listening. The MMF will be back in the MNC once Chartrand is replaced as president, which is coming very soon. But go ahead,
Well,
Carl.
I think you're right on the money there, Tim, because we've seen this before where people have left the Métis National Council when the three Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario left MNC a little while back, and then they were deemed as still part of the MNC by the courts here not so long ago. And so, yeah, I think you're right. The MMF will end up back in, and I hope that everybody looks at this and learns from it, because what we can do, and this is my suggestion, is the MNC stay together.
I say that. Let me tell you why I say that. I say that because we have a brand new president in MNC, but we have to give this new president in the MNC a fair shot at running things properly. Now, my only concern with the way things are structured in MNC right now is Portress. Portress is in there. That is my concern with the current setup with the MNC. I would highly recommend the AMF step in and demand to be part of the MNC.
Well, the AMF hasn't removed itself from the MNC, and they've when I helped establish the Edmonton Métis Community Association, the Athabasca Métis Community Association, as a juncture to form a new provincial body. We didn't know the Alberta Métis Federation was going to be our name. But when we built those two boards, we wanted to be part of the Métis National Council. That was the only way I was going to work with it, is if it was with the MNC. That was in 2019. That's when we still had a lot of infighting, and it was shortly after the Blue Blob was released. And, we could have, when COVID hit, we've kind of been all scrambled, and a lot of people are using COVID as a as a forefront for their own agenda, and that's bad. Portress's people went down here and opened up a new local during the pandemic here, right in Athabasca, and it was in opposition to the Athabasca Landing Métis community, which is basically the AMF, and. So those types of infighting things, I think, they're good and bad. I mean, it's good because it keeps everybody else in check and makes them improve their model, but it's bad because the news gets a hold of that and it makes us look unstable. But I think when it comes to democracy, you kind of have to make sure that everybody's represented. If you ever do get elected, if you can maintain 50% of your people happy, you're doing pretty dang good. And I agree with you, Timothy. I think the MNC has some opportunities here to move forward, and I hope we can.
Yeah.
Do that. I don't have a word with the AMF anymore. I haven't tried to talk to them. They haven't reached out to me. I'm not very happy with the way they're appointing their own children to be presidents while they're presidents of other boards. I don't like that. I tried to work with the Donalds specifically, and what it really come down to there was just a lot of disagreements on how we were handling our COVID funding and COVID relief, and that's why I left. And so wherever that's at, I'm not sure. I hope that they are successful in their future ventures. So, and I wish the Alberta Métis Federation all the best. And if they become the larger governing body in Alberta, kudos to them. It's up to the people to decide that, though, not somebody sitting in an air-conditioned office in Ottawa.
That's right, and I totally agree with you. And I think with the MNC, the huge challenges, I have a high finance background, and I think the huge challenges for the MNC and the grave concerns that I have, and we'll be looking into this further, is the Métis Veterans Legacy Fund, on what's happening with that. And $30 million was given to that fund in 2019, and according to the MNC part of the financials, only $420,000 has been given out to veterans. And we know that David Chartrand was working with that Veterans Legacy Fund. So I think we've got to uncover where the difference between the 30 million from the feds and only 420, where that money went to.
Well, to our knowledge, it's 420,000. We still waiting to see more paperwork.
Yeah, well, that was the financials as of March 2020, and then again the 60s scoop, where David Chartrand was the Minister of Social Services in regards to the 60s scoop and what's going to happen with all that. I mean, that's two big boulders.
Yeah, so I'm glad you kind of lead off into that very professionally, Alexandria. Thank you. And it is, you kind of hit the topic on the head here, because Mr. Chartrand is in charge of these large funds, like you mentioned, the Veterans Legacy Fund, which I think I might have a couple of relatives that might benefit from that, because their husbands served in World War II. But into the 60s scoop, and that is me totally 100%. I attended the 60s scoop engagement session in Saskatoon in April of 2019.
Right.
And it was chaired by the Métis National Council. And I would love to give a shout out to Dr. Jacqueline Maurice, author of Stolen Children.
That's great. Thank you.
And the CEO of the 60s Scoop Healing Foundation.
Right. That's awesome, Carl.
So when I look at the 60 Scoop funding, I got a really frustrating email the other day. It would have came out the same day that the MMF released the letter that they were leaving the MNC. It probably was a simultaneous reaction that they would have contacted all of their 60 Scoop survivors that they were in charge of administering.
Right.
I'm hoping that they did reach out to every single survivor that they were in charge of their portfolio, because a lot of survivors didn't sign on to what the MNC were doing. They didn't like to work as a group. They wanted to take their own personal way of it, and that's up to them. That's their decision. So, and you know what, Chartrand shouldn't be pissed off at them for doing that. So they're blaming that in the letter I received from MMF. They are blaming personal agendas regarding the 60 Scoop lawsuit for them dissolving their interest in it.
Wow.
That's what I got from that letter. I'd have to go in and outline the exact paragraph of which page that was on, but that's the gist of it I got. So really what I see is Mr. Chartrand was in charge of this portfolio, and he needs to hand it off to somebody else, and make sure that he's accounted for what he spent and what's left and where's it going to go, and who the MNC should definitely be in charge of this portfolio. Or maybe they're allowing their survivors the opportunity to allow the MMF to administer it for them, but they do not have the right to have my email address and contact me. I am not a member of the Manitoba Métis Federation. They are breaching my rights under the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act by contacting me regarding the 60 Scoop. This Métis National Council has my authority to contact me, not the MMF. Thank you. I'll pass the mic on.
That's the conflict of interest right there. I don't know. I mean, I seen that letter where it was dated on the 29th. And I mean, I don't know if they had a legal right, since that was the same day that they were withdrawing from the MNC, if they have a legal right to contact 60 Scoop survivors like that. I mean, until it is decided who is going to administer the program at the MNC, I mean, what right did Chartrand have to send that letter?
I don't think he had the right to send it to members that are not MMF.
Right.
If there's an MMF member that they were helping with, they should have, done that, but they should be talking to the governing body that's administering that. And in my situation, they should have contacted the MNC, because I've left any provincial body. I'm totally discouraged. The only one I believe in right now is Metis Nation of Ontario, because they finally refined their registry, and
That's
I praise them for that. So we need to have clarity on how the MMF is going to transfer that portfolio back to the MNC, or at least how Chartrand is going to relieve himself from the administration on that file.
That's right. And I mean, like you said, you're not a member of the MMF, so there's no reason why you should have received that letter from David Chartrand on the 29th. That's a conflict of interest. And like I said, the legalities behind that is kind of a breach of the Privacy Act, where they would have access to your email information to send you that letter. That's kind of scary. And I mean, until there was an official legal transition of the portfolio, everything sort of maybe should have been at a standstill, and maybe just a form type information letter telling everybody to, you know, hang tight. We're going through a transitional phase. Once everything's been legally finalized, you know, information will be sent out. But I think David Chartrand and the MMF, in my mind, jumped the gun and did something that they really shouldn't have done. That yes, they should have contacted MMF 60 Scoop survivors, but not people that are not card-holding members of the MMF.
And if that was part of something that the MNC was handling, then once they pulled out of the MNC, they definitely should not, he should not have continued his role in that, because that was a part of the MNC and is a part of the MNC. And I want to correct something I said earlier when I said this new president's not a nepotism president. What I want to say is, let me stand corrected, she has not been proven at this point to be a nepotism president. We're hoping that she's not going to be that, and we have high hopes, and it looks like it's a brighter future for the MNC. But go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, no, I'd like to congratulate Ms. Caron on her election as the president of the Métis National Council. We need more women in politics. We need that different thinking, and we can't just be all men or all women. We have to all think equally, and we have to also remove the sexuality from our judgments. Racism, sexuality, and monetary. Capitalism, let's just say, are judgments that are holding us back as a society. So I'm hoping that Ms. Caron can bring us some change. And when it comes to the 60s scoop, the MNC needs to step up and say, you know, we're working on this portfolio. We will contact survivors as soon as we have a definitive answer. And I think, Alexandra, you mentioned that, and that is the way it should have been handled. And I have to look into the FOIP Act and the Conflict of Interest Act to see what particular lines of that legislation or subsections would apply in this matter. But I hope to hell that we get a group of people that are pissed off as I am this morning, because I damn near threw up when I read that. I'm so disgusted that I had to eat out of a dumpster at the age of 15, and they want to piss away my 60 scoop administration like this.
Yeah, that's
screw you, Chartrand.
Yeah, that was uncalled for. And like I said, I'm going to be looking into the legalities myself, and I had to read that letter several times to really digest it, and I became so angry. And I know your anger, and I couldn't even begin to fathom that. But another section of that letter angered me when David Chartrand used the term bastardization of their membership. And I thought, and this is my opinion, is he saying that everybody that is not a part of the Red River Métis are bastard Métis? It's on the second page of that letter, and that was one of the reasons why they said they were withdrawing from the MNC. And I thought, what a racial term, and to call, in my mind, to call people that are not Red River Métis bastard Métis. You know what? This has angered me the entire day, and to say, how dare someone pass judgment on another individual and use this on an official notification to 60 Scoops. It says survivors. He slashed it out and says friends. And this is coming from a so-called leader. Like, I'm so sick of these racial slurs, this bashing, this discrimination, and coming from a leader. If this is the way Chartrand looks as people that are not Red River Métis, as bastardization of their membership or their citizenship, I'm glad they left the MNC. Good riddance, because with that kind of racial tone, we're used to being treated like this by the colonial government, settlers, etc., but not an individual that is professing to be a Métis leader. That, to me, I'm so outraged. I'm just thinking what my next steps are going to be in regards to that racial terminology, because I'm not going to let that go. And I think it's just appalling in this day and age. I mean, I don't know if the Human Rights Commission can be involved, etc., but I'm so disgusted at that term, bastardization, used in a letter to send to 60 Scoop survivors / friends who are going through, trauma. They're living through trauma, and every day, because, the pain and the hurt never goes away. We just find a way to deal with it. But to use racial terminology, it was totally, totally inappropriate.
Yeah, no, it was very inappropriate, and there's probably some more inappropriate things that we could find in that letter, and it just reflects the atmosphere that they were administering, and I'm hoping that atmosphere didn't spread to the AMF.
But what I want to do is I want to actually say this: the MMF has helped a lot of people. We would not be where we at today without Chartrand and without Chartier, without a doubt. They were on the front lines. They did a lot of fighting. They were out there, and they were doing the right things and going in the right directions. Where the problems came is when Chartrand basically keeps running for office. Been a lot of questionable elections out there that has happened. The criteria to even run is just crazy, to run for president of the MMF. And I will say that you cannot take away what David Chartrand has done and what Clem Chartier has done for the Métis people, because we will not be, and let's make that clear to everybody listening, we will, even though we're not happy with the last few years of what's happened, we will not be where we at without them. And so I do want to say that. With that being said, they know the citizens are pissed off. They know that the citizens have been wanting change, and they made that change damn near impossible. And so that is the problem. And so, yeah.
Yeah, no, didn't they MMF go and change the process on how you can get elected?
Well, you have to jump through so many hoops now, and volunteer work and all this, that it almost makes it literally impossible or unattainable to actually run with all the hoops and specifications that you have to go through. That's where a lot of younger Métis people were having difficulty, because youth may not have all these various volunteer hours and all that under their belt, because they are a youth, but I mean, they shouldn't be disqualified and being told to go to hell because they don't agree with a dictator like Chartrand.
Well, yeah, and they went and changed that, and that should have actually they should have waited to change that until after the election, because I don't know if they announced that in their mandate to get elected or re-elected, that they would change the process of getting elected. So I mean, you are right. It's you're really just promoting a freaking tyranny at this point. And so I really wish that MMF would look at that and reassess what they did there, because they are basically only allowing the insiders a shot at election, and you're not going to promote change by re-electing the same group of people.
And I would like to add, though, one of the criteria of volunteers, because I've volunteered for a lot of things in my life, and I've helped a lot of people. And I will say this: I think that's a great criteria. I think that a president should be, one, experienced, and two, have some volunteer work under their belt. What Alexandria was saying was the amount of criteria that there is there makes it impossible for somebody who is younger to run, and anybody should be able to run. I know that was a lot of concerns with the new MNC president. A lot of people were emailing us saying, well, they don't think that she's experienced, blah, blah, blah. But from everything that I've heard, there seems to be real promise here with this new president, and we're going to see, because really she has the ability to show that someone who is younger can actually go in there and make an incredible change, and really for the positives, and that would be a great role model and an example to follow in future elections, where it wouldn't be so concerning if somebody younger got in as president of another organization.
Yeah, no, and that is a great lead by example situation there. I'm hoping too that the new leader will bring in some changes, and we need somebody to grab the reins of the Métis 60 scoop, Millennium Scoop portfolio right away. That has to happen like yesterday.
Yeah, that's got to be top
MMF
priority.
has already got their hands in the pot like they want it.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted mine. So MNC, get out there and do something.
Yeah,
before the MMF takes it.
That's right. And you spoke of earlier about the MNO registry that's really been put through the ringer, scrutinized, put under a microscope, and a lot of us have been talking that I've never once, I don't even know if the MMF has their registry posted or if it's recently been scrutinized by experts that were able to completely confirm that every person that is an MMF card holding member is an absolute Métis. So I know that there's been so much pressure and lateral damage and lateral violence against the MNO. I don't think what one has to go through, all of them have to go through, and I don't think the MMF registry and citizenship list has been scrutinized as of late.
Well, that's probably one of the reasons why they pulled out of the MNC, is because they knew some severe changes were coming. But Chartrand, Chartier, and Goudon, they're all right on the levels of the amount of people who are not Métis who are trying to get Métis citizenship in order to get funding. So they have a valid reason of concern there, because there's a lot of people that are not Métis who are out there saying that they are Métis. And so that they're right. I mean, you can't sit there because you don't agree with somebody's politics and completely bash everything that they're saying. They had a valid reason for saying what they were saying. And yeah, I support them in that. People should have to prove they're Métis to be a part of a Métis organization. With that being said, let's look at some of the alignments that Chartier's made with his supposed girlfriend, I guess. I don't know if it's his girlfriend or whatever, who's running different programs within the Métis organizations and getting so many different contracts. It's alleged that that's his girlfriend, and that's for another show, but or was his girlfriend, I don't know. But go ahead, Carl.
No, I think that when you have these entities that are appropriating our identity for the purpose of monetary gain, and they don't really fit into the traditional Métis identity criteria, yes, we have to put something in place to prevent that. And in the case of the Acadians, that is not so. And New France, that is not so. We have to accept that there was a French version of the Métis Nation when the English came during the Acadian expulsions and the 9 Years' War. And we have to acknowledge that. Maybe we can't be saying, okay, we should be accepting people that, can only connect back to them and then it's lost. Well, in some cases we can't find the records, and we have to start accepting at least one or two what we call honorary Métis citizens every year, and that's what we do here in Athabasca, and what they've been doing for quite a while is, if you contribute to the board for several years and you're Métis, why not give them an honorary citizenship? And in some cases, yes, we should be, but there are people that were creating fake Métis cards and fake organizations, and I'd have to go back into my journals to get the names of those, but I would like to see people stop doing that. That is the reason that the blue blob was drawn, and I did support the idea of the start of a homeland map, so it did start the conversation. I have to give the boys credit for that, but they just they drew that blue blob into like a Pac-Man looking thing and attacked Ontario with it. And kudos to Margaret Farrell for staying so strong through all that and being resilient and passing that registration investigation onto a third party so that there is no conflict of interest there. And the MNO really outlined that criteria. You have the traditional genealogical connection, you're contributing or at least known by the local or community association, and you self-identify, which is supposed to be the first thing.
Carl, let me ask you this. If you're giving people all these honoraries who are just contributing, who are not Métis, are we leaving out some Métis from funding? And also that blue blob map, I think the first thing the MNC president should do is get rid of that blue blob map, and also to have a Chinese IT company. I'm pretty sure that maybe they were made honorary or whatever, but I'm pretty sure we have some Métis IT out there.
Well, you know what? I'm going to jump in because the thing that bothers me, Carl, is that there are people in the East that are legitimately Métis, but what I do not like is that everybody in the East is being painted with the same brush by people like Goudon, Chartrand. That is not right. That is not fair. You can't lump everybody into one group and say, okay, you're from the East, you don't matter. That, you know what, there's historical data that will tell you that that is absolute bullshit, and to use a settler or a French Canadian white person to validate your painting everybody with one brush, I'm sorry, I don't go for that, period.
And also, speaking of the records that we can't find, Carl, a lot of those records were burned. And so for them to say, oh, well, they don't have these records, well, a lot of them were burned back in the days. We know that they got burned. So you're not going to have a lot of records out there. And so that's the very unfortunate part when it comes to when you're talking about the people that do live in the East. But I think there should be some commonality here where we need to say, as a nation, to take that blue blob and get the hell rid of that, because that's no good. We done cut out so many people with that map. They're using that map to eliminate Métis rights.
Well, you know what? My last word on this stupid blue blob map, I would literally like to blow my nose with it and put it in the trash, because that has caused so much lateral violence, so much lateral damage, so much hate and division with Métis right across Canada. It's just got complete garbage, and it should be just completely square one, because we used Tayet's map, we used this map. It's a combination of several maps, and that in 2018 the motion was seconded by Goudon to accept this map. Well, the thing is, were everybody consulted on this map?
Hell no.
No, I don't think we went through a rigorous process on assessing the homeland. We've left out New Fronts, and that is the reason we're establishing the homeland map in the first place. And we need to have some more clarity on what New Fronts was. Was it Métis? I mean, in some cases, the French fur traders had established that. And so where does that map go? I agree with you, though we should probably take that homeland map and use it as a very expensive piece of toilet paper. And we should stop allowing people to appropriate our identity like that. That the way that map came out, it was rushed. It was, it was done after an election. It wasn't even part of a mandate of an election. We knew that we had to solidify who the Métis are. We have to draw some type of criteria that aligns with it. Now, I agree with you. We can't paint everybody with one brush.
But hey, Carl,
all the communities have to stand up and give their unique perspective. Yes.
Because I understand a lot of people are misunderstanding things out there when Gudon and other people are saying Métis doesn't equal mixed. That's true to an extent. Like, so,
European, let's define which Europeans they were, and I will say French and Scotch. The French and the Scotch that coexisted with First Nations prior to 1867. So we had an established economic infrastructure that existed, and in 1867, international foreign investment forced the railroad, forced the 49th parallel, and we lost our identity to that railroad. That's what Riel was protecting. It was the French and the Scotch specifically that lived here and interbred with fur traders and took on what we called country wives. The ones that stayed here with their country wives, that's the birth to the nation. Whether they were French or Scotch, that's who. It's not European, it's French and Scotch. We need to draw a line there.
Well, then somebody needs to update that on the information that's out there, because the information that's out there in educational circles it just says European and Native. But however, I'm Scottish, so I'm in there. So I got the Scottish ancestry for sure. So, but the thing is, there's a lot of false information about that out there, and like you said, it has to be defined. But let's take the fact that you're saying French and Scottish. Okay, so if you're French and mixed with Native, or you're Scottish and mixed with Native, then you're Métis. So why does the map come into play on defining who you are?
Well, Gudon drew that map. Well, let's just say the Métis National Council drew that map, so we had something to work with the Métis Nation Accord on. We had to, and that map should be expanded. I'd have to look at the particular meeting that brought that map in to see if they were allowing for changes to that map as we, continue the negotiation on where we think the boundaries should be for that map. And let's, when we look at French and Scottish, let's look at the French and Scottish that existed with the fur traders, part of the fur trade, not the French and Scotch that came in after 1867 and after the 9 Years' War. It was before that. It was, it was actually, what brought the French and the Scotch together was the Pemmican Wars and how we all came together. That's what Cuthbert Grant had the flag for. That signified unity between the English and the French, the Scotch and the French, let's say. And the origin of Rupert's Land was 1690, and that was when the English domination or Scottish domination of the fur trade took over. And when the 9 Years' War happened, and it was because of the Acadian expulsions, and the majority of the Scotch that participated in the 9 Years' War were victims of the Highland clearances.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So we need to solidify that. I mean, there were definitely some relatives of those servants of the Regiment of Foot from Britain that interbred with Native wives and stayed here with their Native wives, with their country wife, and built Canada and worked with the fur trade, and actually went down to Washington and established Oregon. The Mackays. The Mackays were huge, and the Sinclairs. So we didn't just maintain this thing. We built it right from day one with First Nations as a partnership, and that's where we need to get back to, is the partnership side of it, not this division.
I totally agree with you. And I think another thing that bothered me at the recent General Assembly that was held in Saskatoon is that a lot of people were heckling President Margaret Froh and really disrespecting her. And she did mention the contentious subject of Pauli. and people were asking her why she was bringing up Pauli, and that's another thing that I have a passion about that has been so misconstrued. People have used
Pauli's Métis.
well, people have used it for their own advantage and then spit it out on the wayside when it didn't serve their purpose anymore. But I mean, when you have people that are, making comments that are attacking people, I was actually very shocked at all the lateral violence and damage, the name calling. And that was people that are they want to join the MMF. They're from BC. They want to join the MMF. And if that's the kind of caliber of people that the MMF want to have as citizens, they can have them, because I was just stunned at some of the, the acting vice president of Metis Nation of BC. Apparently, he's not Métis. The acting president, the acting president, Lisa Dawn Smith, she's not Métis. And people
that's what people are saying. Let's correct that. Well, they are Métis.
There was some kind of a citizenship challenge, and throwing, instead of really focusing on what the General Assembly was supposed to be, and they are nationalists that are asserting this lateral damage, and I really hope that Lisa Dawn Smith and Lewis, take legal action against these people that are falsely slandering them, saying that they're not Métis out there. I hope they do, as a learning curve to people, that people, should think before they really speak.
Yeah, our emotions are sometimes get a control of us, and we need to sometimes just breathe before we talk, and I'm a victim of that. And to the Homeland Map. So regarding the Homeland Map and why they removed Pauli's harvest from the map in the Sault Ste. Marie area, it just astonishes me. I mean, if we're going to make claims with his duck and call himself a Pauli Métis with his duck, but he won't put it on the Homeland Map, you're kind of putting your foot in your mouth there, Godon. So, and whatever Toulette's doing there to enable that shouldn't be happening. And I haven't followed the BC thing that closely. I don't know how BC would apply to Pauli. I mean, being that we're on Canadian soil in modern times, yes, but in traditional times, no. BC was founded through the NWC's charter, explorations during the Northwest Passage and Alexander Mackenzie and the finding of Oregon, and the HBC broke through there, or at least the last documented fur trade to come up the Columbia and then cross at over to the Athabasca River and then take their goods up to the Hudson's Bay that way. And that was their version of the Northwest Passage. So to me, that's the origin of the BC and Métis. They should be looking at that a little bit closer. And there's a book being written by Anderson called the York Factory Express, I believe, that's kind of highlighting that. Now, I mean, I can't say that should be our definitive criteria for the BC Métis Nation. I have to read a lot more about that. I'm not 100% in doubt on that, but that's what I learned from my research in the Métis, is that we should be looking at that era, not the Pauli for BC. I mean, Pauli represents the fact that we were transient and we definitely existed. Mm-hmm. If we're all going to feed off that same thing, we all have to have that map included in there, and that map needs to go down the Mississippi River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, because as you know, especially during the buffalo hunts, a lot of Métis ended up in the States, and and like you said, transient. So.
Yeah, but talking about transient, I think now that the MNC or more Métis organizations, since the passage of were being labeled into the same terminology with the Supreme Court of Canada as Indians with Inuit. I think since the United States honors the Jay Treaty, I think I would like to see moving forward on the agenda is that Canada honor the Jay Treaty, so it's on both sides of the border. That's very important, that since we're included in that definition, because, you know, even my great-grandparents, I mean, they were married in North Dakota. My great-grandfather was born in the United States. We are transient people, so borders should, just like First Nations or status, we should not have borders. We should be able to come and go in regards to the Jay Treaty.
Yeah, no, the Jay Treaty, as I've understood it, applies to treaties 4 and 6 card holders, and I'd have to reread on that to verify that. And yes, I do agree that the Métis definitely coexisted in Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, and right around the Great Lakes, and they use the I think it's the Missouri River that originates up in that area to transport the goods to the Mississippi and then down to the south. Those would have been French-dominated forts with First Nations, and
you have some Scottish too, Carl, because like I said, I'm Scottish, so you have some Scottish that went down that route too.
Oh, absolutely. The Scotch and the French coexisted after the Pemmican Wars. They shared those routes. That's what where the Michif built their language. It was a mix of French, Scotch, and whichever indigenous language you were.
That's
so
right.
You're right. The Scotch came over, and what happened during the Battle of Seven Oaks, it really forced a lot of the English American influences back down south.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to focus on today. When we think invasion, we're not being invaded by anybody but Americans. We're being invaded by American colonization. And if we hadn't fought as Canadians during those Pemmican Wars, that 49th parallel wouldn't exist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I
So
mean,
when you think of the Jay Treaty,
elaborate on that a little bit. You say you're being invaded by Americans. Elaborate on that a little bit.
We are being invaded by American corporate profit and what's known as the American Legislative Exchange Council. And that is a model that is used to influence government for corporate profit.
Right.
So, that's that's a whole other ball of wax, but that's what Audra Poitras is doing with her money from the Canadian government, is she's using the ALEC model and funneling it within her own people, and Ron Quintel's caught on to that, and he's doing the same thing. So, I mean, in some ways it's not illegal, in some ways it is. I'd have to look into that, but going back to what should we do to acknowledge American turf as Métis homeland, that, I think, the Jay Treaty is the beginning of that, but that only really works on treaties 4 and 6 and some of the First Nations that harvested in those areas, and how that would apply to the Métis in Treaty 1, because we are mentioned in Treaty 1, and that, and my ancestors are actually translators on Treaty 6.
Right.
So we were probably have some type of hereditary access to the Jay Treaty because of that. And mine, when it comes to my lineage, I mean, it's dominantly Scotch, but it is some French too, but more on the European, on my maternal side. And my dad's side, the McKay name, we worked hard with Sir Alexander Mackenzie, to establish a trading route that could coexist with First Nations, and that was disrupted with a railroad and American corporate influence, and that's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we know that you're definitely one of the Métis that speaks your mind, and you're a fighter, and you have courage, and it's always great to really have you on the show, because we lack that in a lot of communities. We lack people that have the courage to come on and talk truth and actually let their voices be heard. And so, is there anything that we missed in this show that you think that you would like to say that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I'm just going to go over my notes here. Like in regards to the 60s scoop.
Yep.
Survivors that are without an administrative council or don't know who they should be looking at, it's the MNC. Don't go to your provincial body. Contact the MNC directly. Um, they they will work on something that we can all agree on. You know, I think taking private action is up to the individual too. That, you know, that should be their route, but we need to look at what we're going to do there. And that, I think we've hit on the head several times. Now, in regards to my story as a 60s scooper, I like to refer myself as a Millennium Scoop survivor, because what it really is the next generation. And I'm Generation X. I'm in my mid-40s. I was taken from school at the age of 12, and I didn't get to know my family throughout my adolescence. I was constantly ripped in between foster care and my maternal and paternal parents, and I was able to reconcile my relationship with my father, and I had a great relationship for 10 years until he passed away. So I'm delighted that I had that. Mm-hmm. And I take those positive memories with me. And my message is that I think if there's any leader in the 60 Scoop reconciliation and healing, it's Dr. Jacqueline Maurice and what she is doing with the what's this group she's called, the 60 Scoop Healing Foundation, and that she's formed. And I think, you know, if you can't find the answers, talk to them, and they will put you into the right direction, because we cannot let the MNC and the MMF piss away the 60 Scoop. That's, I think, what's really got me today. And I would like to send a big shout out to my favorite foster care mom, Miss Ellie from Regina.
That's awesome, Carl. Like I said, you know, we're sorry. You know, we can't even fathom what yourself and so many other 60 Scoop Millennium survivors went through. It's just atrocious. And I think, you know, you're an inspiration with sharing your story and sharing your knowledge. And, you know, you know, all over social media, you have such a vast knowledge that you're able to share. And I think you've really inspired a lot of people to step forward and speak about things. And I think that's kudos to you. But definitely what you're saying, big red flag with the 60s Scoop, and seeing this letter from David Chartrand, some of the terminology, the legalities of this letter. If you're not an MMF card holding member, certainly search out who you've mentioned in regards to making sure that you're being represented properly. To me, now that you've elaborated more on this 60 Scoop, I'm more fearful than I was when I've read that letter initially today.
Well, let's be clear. Whoever's handling the 60 Scoop thing, they're going to benefit financially. Obviously, they're going to take a cut of whatever is given to the survivors. And what I would like to say is, and if somebody wants to dispute that, it's very easy. Since Chartrand is claiming the MMF wants to handle it, have them handle it with no financial benefit at all, if they're just doing it for purely the sake of helping people, where they receive $0. And then guess what? It'd be back at the MNC really quick. So it's already at the MNC. It needs to stay at the MNC, as you've told people to contact the MNC, because that's the rightful place. That's where it's supposed to be handled.
Yeah, I think that's how it should be, but it should be also up to the individual. If they've lost all complete trust in the MNC, they definitely have to take the matter into their own hands, or look into other avenues. And I would definitely make sure that they do research Dr. Jacqueline Maurice and the 60 Scoop Healing Foundation.
That's awesome. We appreciate that. And like I said, that's good advice, Carl. And as always, Carl, it's always a pleasure to hear your insight. You're a very knowledgeable Métis individual in Alberta that has a lot of truth to say out there, and we certainly appreciate it.
And for me to reflect on what you just said, too, for those who have lost faith in MNC, I understand that's during the time that Chartier had it. We have the brand new president. Let's let it play out. There's a lot of people in Alberta that has concerns of portraits being aligned in that effort, and she could always change. We're not saying she can't change, but we're saying the way that things are right now is a huge problem, and she's just not, in our eyes, has not changed at all over the last few years. And so, yeah, and again, as Alexandria was saying, you're a great guest. We love to have you on, and I just want to make sure you get out everything that you wanted to get out and let the people know.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on today, guys, and I'm so delighted to have this conversation. It takes a weight off of my shoulders. It really does, because to talk to this stuff with my family, they don't understand what happened. Very few do. Yeah. So thank you for the channel to give to the Métis people. Hey, Koshimaka, hi, see you again.
You too, Carl, and as always, it's a pleasure.